What's up, everybody? The Deathwatch Codex has been out for a little bit now for 8th edition, and I'm a fan of it. I like the 7th edition Codex a lot, other the potential therein, not just for Deathwatch, but for thinking outside the box and doing your own DIY, more special ops style of Force, and that vibe is still here, alive and well. So I was really curious to see what they were going to do 8th edition wise, and as we saw in the preview week, we knew Primaris were getting into the Codex, and that's cool because that was a question of mine until we learned about it. So with that said, just going to give my impressions ramble as I tend to do when I pick up a new Codex, and just have some fun with it. So share your thoughts as well in the comments section below. So I'm a big Deathwatch fan. The Deathwatch RPG, I think, does a fantastic job of representing the unique kill team aspect of the Deathwatch. And the Codex did a good job of kind of retconning the capability to be fielded as a full-fledged army force. Before that, it was basically, hey, here's a Stern Guard squad that I picked it up like Deathwatch, and people done it and it looked great, but it didn't really have anything going for them past that. And before that, we did have a PDF for the Deathwatch kill teams, but they felt like prototype Stern Guard. So now we have a full-on Deathwatch army that feels very much its own thing, despite being a collection of Space Marine chapters. So with that said, some of the stuff is streamlined in comparison to other Space Marine codices. We don't have Tartaros and Cataphracti options for Terminators in the Deathwatch book. It's just Terminator squads. And that's fine. They don't need those options. And you can still use them. If you convert up a Cataphracti or a Tartaros Terminator to look all Deathwatchy, by all means, go for it. You just feel it as part of a standard Terminator squad. No big deal. So that's fine. We have more options now for the Deathwatch to really pursue because, of course, Primaris are added. And we also have a special character now where we didn't before. We have Watch Captain Artemis, a guy who is not new. Yes, his name is Artemis, but his existing has been for a while. He was firstly, I believe his first incarnation and really his only true incarnation for a while was an Inquisitor, which was a specialist game that had bigger models than standard. I think they were 54mm models. And you played it. It was kind of like a pseudo RPG-esque game. And Artemis is one of the guys in it. And his model is cool. I think he's from the Mortifactors chapter, but he didn't really exist in the 40k tabletop game until, more recently, you could say for sure. So it's cool to see him have an entry in the Codex. And therefore you get the Deathwatch Codex. It's one special character. One's better than none, in my opinion, so hey, that's pretty cool. With that said, they've made good strides with special issue ammunition, and they made good strides with Primaris in here. All in all, I think the Codex is solid. I think it does a good job, and again, is fantastic for Deathwatch, and I think it will be really good for thinking outside the box for more DIY, spec op, specialized type of forces that maybe you have for your own chapter concept or whatever. So, with that said, to wrap things up for the real quick summary, I like the Codex overall. I think they did a good job. I'm going to break down a couple of instances specifically and go into a bit more detail now about some things. And the big one to talk about is mixed units, especially Primaris. The Primaris mixed unit isn't the only one to exist. You also have that for standard Space Marines in the form of the Veteran Squad. And they operate very similarly. You have a core of which you build around. So you can add Terminators or bikes, for example, to the regular Veteran Squad of Space Marines. But it's built around a core of Veteran Space Marines, the actual Veteran entry. And it works out well because they can take a variety of war gear options to really personalize your Deathwatch kill team or your Deathwatch Veteran Squad. And therefore, while it is a core contingent of veterans, they can feel very different from each other because of what you gave each veteran. So the mixed unit capability works well there. It's just a little bit of a clunky rule, mixed units in general. It's always been a little bit of an odd rule with, percentages of the unit and what hits go where. It muddies the waters a little bit, but it works out well enough in the end. Primaris had the capability to be mixed as well, which was really cool to see. That was really the first progress for Primaris we've seen since their inception. The Primaris are very specialized units with very little in the way of adaptability via war gear options. Their war gear options further their pursuit of whatever they are. For example, Hellblasters can be more mobile with one of the warrior options, or be more sedentary, be more static, but hit harder with another one of their options. Or you can be jack of all trades with no option. It's the same thing with intercessors and whatnot. So the options are very limited, and therefore they feel almost self-stagnating by GW's design. They're not bad, it's just that you're not doing too much with them crazily outside of their intended squad types, as they're meant to supplement Space Marines and be useful on their own, but they're not meant to overtake them. So here's the first real case where we see some progress. We see mixed units. But while every unit is in the Codex, so Hellblasters are in the Deathwatch Codex, Aggressors and all that jazz, it's only the Intercessor squad entry that can be mixed. But it has to start with a core of Intercessors, which is 1 Sergeant and then 4 Intercessor Marines. From there, you can add to it in a mixed unit format. While this is nice, I think if they added a bit more wariness to the rules, they could have done it where even in the minimum 5-man size could have been mixed. You could say that the sergeant must be an intercessor sergeant or whatever, and then maybe let you switch out 2 of your standard 5 or something. They could make it so instead of having a 7-man squad, so you can have 2 Hellblasters, you can have a 5-man squad with a sergeant, 2 intercessors, and then 2 Hellblasters there to keep the squad size small if that's your goal, to have numerous small squads being mixed. It's whatever. It's a nitpick in all honesty, but it does feel a little clunky in comparison to the veteran squad because of how the war gear options are so different between the two. But I do like this Primaris progression. I think, if anything, this is a good stepping stone for how they're eventually going to do Space Wolves. I don't know what their plan are for Space Wolf, or not just Intercessor, but Primaris stuff. I'm not a fan of them, so I don't really care too much. But I will completely acknowledge the fact and agree that Space Wolves are very unique in their chapter organization. And that means, having an Intercessor squad and a Hellblaster squad like everybody else doesn't really flow with them. It would feel odd to see it in there without some really clever fluff reasonings. We know they have the option to have them. We've seen it. Some example model painted up, I believe, from the Heavy Metal team. And they've basically said so much as that every Space Marine chapter has access to them, loyalist stuff. So they can't just not give them Primaris at this point. It's far too late for that. So I think one of the reasons we haven't seen Space Wolves yet is because whether or not they have the Codex done at this time or not, and they're just waiting to release it, I have no idea. But they were probably figuring out and wrapping their heads around the Primaris situation for Space Wolves. So I think that Deathwatch, if anything, were a byproduct or a stepping stone kind of setup for how they do their mixed unit Primaris stuff. So it's still cool to have, and maybe we'll see this evolve into something that makes sense for the Space Wolves. But with that said, if you so desire nothing but Hellblasters in terms of units in the unit, there's the Hellblaster entry. Just keep in mind, if you want mix, you must go with Intercessors, and they must be the core of your mixed force. From there, I also want to say, I think they did a big missed opportunity here with the Primaris, because the only transport they have access to is a repulsor. That's how it's always been. But the Deathwatch don't follow the same rules. They are outside the jurisdiction, if you will, the jurisdiction norm that is the Codex Astartes. They are outside of a chapter organization. It is multiple chapters coming together to fight side by side to kill the alien. They're special ops Space Marines, basically. Why can't they use the Corvus Blackstar, which is like the Deathwatch transport? That's unique to them. They can't. In the entry, they cannot do it. And it's really unfortunate, and I don't understand why. I don't think it would be unfair. I think it would just further add to the uniqueness. You could even balance it out by having them count as 2 models like a Terminator does or whatever. I don't know. My point is, it just feels very odd in this book specifically for them to not be able to have access to another form of transportation. I never understood it to begin with, aside from being self-limiting by GW. They can't take drop pods, they can't use Land Raiders even, only the Repulsor. And all I'm saying is, for the Deathwatch Codex, don't give them access to anything else but the Corvus Blackstar and the Repulsor. I think that alone would have been more than enough, but Nevertheless, you don't have that access, so just keep that in mind. A little bit of a missed opportunity there. So lastly, special issue ammunition. It's great. It's always been cool. There's a lot more things, bolt weaponry, that make use of it now than there was in the past. I'm pretty sure, I'm fairly confident in the previous Codex, Storm Bolters could not use special issue ammunition. Maybe if they could, then I definitely did not see that when I read through it. But I remember that constantly being a thing, that Storm Bolters don't use it. Now, Storm Bolters are one of many things that can use special issue ammunition. Not every bolt type weapon can. The Bolt Storm Gauntlets, whatever they're called, for example, cannot use it. And the Assault Bolter that the Inceptors have or whatever can't use it either. But that's okay. A lot more can, including the Intercessor bolt rifles and all that. So that's cool, which means you're able to have access to a lot more special issue ammunition shenanigans, which is great because it's kind of the main shtick, if you will, of the Deathwatch in the tabletop side of things. And while there is a nice list of all the bolt weapons that can make use of it, you also have to have in the ability keyword special issue ammunition in the entry for it to use it. So basically, infantry only. Not every infantry unit has this, but most do, and no vehicles that I can tell do. So that's the limiting factor there. But still, I think great progress for special issue ammunition. I do wish the ammunition felt a bit more unique than they do now. It's not that they're watered down to the point of being useless, not at all. The Kraken round, for example, is great. Hellfire is still good. All of it's great still. Still cool to see a nice little bonus or a buff in some way to your bolt capability, which is cool. I just perhaps would have liked to see in a whole new round, generic round, meaning non-relic gear round, added to the mix. I think that would be really swell, if you will. Or maybe just some tweakings to the rounds as they are now. Maybe add a little bit extra spice in there. I don't know how, but they feel good. I just think that they could have felt a little bit more, with a little bit more oomph behind them, or just a brand new round to accompany them. Nothing bad there. Definitely a nice step forward for special issue ammunition, because you no longer have to worry about, do I maximize special issue capability in terms of ammunition, or do I maximize other stuff that can't use it? Obviously, if it's on a bolt weapon, you can't use it, but now, for example, the Storm Bolter. I remember looking at that going, man, that's a shame that they can't make use of special issue ammunition that way. Now you don't have to worry about it. Now you can have your Storm Bolter, have your cake and eat it too, so that's pretty cool. Storm Bolter with special ammunition. Combi weapons, of course, could do it, but then you have the bolt rifle, and you look at the stat lines for the weapons, look at what the different rounds can do, and you can start comboing up ideas and seeing what capabilities you really have therein, and that's really cool. So, anyways, all in all, I think a solid book. I'm looking forward to delving into it deeper and formulating ideas with it. So, yeah, that's my take on the Deathwatch book. Thanks for sticking through my entirely too long ramble. I know, that's what I do. And leave any question, comments, requests, and your own thoughts on the Deathwatch Codex in the comment section below. And until next time, take it easy.